Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 164 of the Kiss Army Nation podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Pasquale Barry.
And I am Claudio Spera. Welcome to the show, everyone.
On this episode, we're going to compare and contrast the contributions to Kiss made by Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons. In other words, who made the most significant contributions to the band?
And to help us answer those questions, so we are joined by our dear friends, again, Patrick DeMontigny, and we're so happy to have back on the show, Curt Towne. So welcome to the show, boys.
Thank you. I'm back.
Yes, yes, you're here, man.
I love it. Thank you for having me.
You know, it's so nice to see you. And before we get into our topic, Curt, so you recently had a record launch for your album, At It Again. So can you share with us what that experience was about?
Well, thank you, and it was awesome. I mean, it was absolutely epic, and I say that because it was done. And it was $1 million stereo. So if you can imagine that, right? It was $1 million stereo, and it was absolutely amazing. So the company Stenheim is the one that had the stereo, and it was amazing. The speakers were $250,000 a piece, and so we just had a great time there. And it was so nice. Everybody was so welcomed, and they had 6 different rooms, and all the rooms they were playing the album. And so it was really cool. So actually there was 2 $1 million stereo systems, one in the front and one in the back. So my wife Truly and I were very nervous because if it's going to sound bad, it's going to sound really bad on $1 million stereo. But the guys at Stenheim, they liked it so much that they're going to include it. And when they go to all these conventions around the world, they're going to include at least one song, I don't know which song, in their rotation to play in Japan, England, LA, all over the world, Boston, and a second one in the playlist that'll get played sometime. So we were very grateful for them having us. We were grateful. Just everything was wonderful. So thank you very much. It's been well received, and 500 limited translucent orange copies. And it's so cool to have a record LP.
Finally.
Right here, my friend, right here.
Thank you so much.
Man, we were talking on the show about, the experience of listening to vinyl. When you listen to the music and you look at the vinyl, it's the whole experience, music experience behind it. And what you have as well in the album, this gatefold, look at that, so awesome. so much to look at and so much to experience. And the music, and I'm not just saying because it's you, Curt, the music is fantastic. I love it.
Thank
I really
you
do.
So much. And the gatefold, the cool thing about that is the experience, right?
Yeah.
So when we were kids and we were, looking through Kiss albums or Alice Cooper or whatever, and you put the album on, you're interacting with the album. You're looking at the pictures, you're reading the liner notes, you're doing all this. So that was part of the excitement of the experience that we wanted to create.
Oh, it works 100%.
Another one from Kiss.
There you go. There you go.
What a beauty. What a beauty.
No, so I saw the pictures from that party, man, and I really wish I was there. It looked like so much fun. Really nice turnout.
Yeah, it was great. It was really just a blessing. It was so great. It was so awesome.
No, well deserved, man. Congratulations.
Thank you. The House of Stereo was so nice to do that for us, and they were so wonderful. And actually, people are still coming into Jacksonville, because a lot of people come from out of town to see a lot of sites and stuff. And so people are still going to the House of Stereo, and they're playing the album. They have them there on the $1 million stereo. Oh. So I get messages saying, I got to listen to it on $1 million stereo, which is really cool. So the House of Stereo is just so awesome in every way. They're so accommodating, so professional, and so nice. I still am in awe. Still wonderful people.
You seem so happy with this, with the turnout, with the whole event, with the music and the album and everything. So well deserved. Incredible.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So you ready to get into this?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So we're going to answer the question, who made the most significant contribution to Kiss? Was it Paul or Gene? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna throw topics at you, and based on those topics, you tell us who made the most significant contribution to the band.
There you go. We're gonna get it going. And before we get to the first question, we didn't have the chance. But Pat, how you doing? All good? So it's nice to see you again.
Very good. Very excited. My vacation is just around the corner, so
Nice.
I'll enjoy it to the fullest. And maybe, who knows, spoil myself with some Kiss stuff. Who knows?
Who knows? Okay, there you go. That's awesome. So first question, we're gonna start with you, Patrick. So who do you believe was the face of Kiss for those iconic, images and faces? So, but who was the face of Kiss for you? Was it Paul or Gene?
Okay, being the person that I am, I can't mention it without Ace and Peter, but I think if I'm going to be very realistic, I think the face that people think of when they think of Kiss, even the general public, I would say Gene. Definitely.
Okay.
Only because I think the persona, although I like the four personas very much, I think his has such a stigma that the minute you see it, you go, okay, that's Kiss. And I think even the other guys in the band know that Gene is the face of Kiss. So in a sense, for instance, like how many products that only have Gene?
Yeah.
Not that many. There are a few. I mean, if you, for the collectors out there, you have the Campus Craft, Canadian company that released a batch of Kiss special posters. There's one that's only a collage of Gene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, I think the face of Kiss is Gene.
There you go. Okay. Curt, what about you? What do you think?
Well, I thought these questions were difficult because at first I thought, well, this and that. And then I'm like, wait a second, hold on. So I had a lot of, mixed emotions about this. So I would have to agree that Gene is the face of Kiss, even though, you may have a favorite, order of favorites, right? I know there's been millions of times I've walked by a mirror and stuck my tongue out like Gene. I'm sure lots of people have done the same thing. And if somebody didn't know anything about Kiss, they knew about his tongue, and and whether he had the makeup on or the makeup off, whether they liked it or they hated it, it would always be that guy with the tongue.
Yes.
So I have to say that's my final answer.
There you go. Pask, what do you think?
It's an interesting question because it depends, I think, on the perspective. So if you're asking from the perspective of a diehard Kiss fan, don't you think that diehard would say it's Paul Stanley? Because he is the frontman. And people who know Kiss knows that Paul is the frontman. If you are a casual fan, don't know the band really well, I think they would say that it's Gene, because Gene is the most out there in the mainstream. And, with his show, Family Jewels, and all of the marketing stuff he does, and I'm sorry, he's an attention whore. He's always putting himself out there. Yeah. Even now, that he hit the end of the road, Gene is out there. All we hear is Gene. Yeah. Very, very little of Paul, So I think in the mainstream, I got to agree with you guys, it's Gene. Yeah. I think for a fan, for me, if you ask for me, I would say it's Paul Stanley. He's the person you see on the stage, front and center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, but that's an interesting take, because actually, by face, you give it a different, meaning. Not just the imagery of seeing let's say a face on a magazine cover. So when you say Paul for a Kiss fan, it's because of being a front man, and he's the driving force, on stage. So that's an interesting one.
But we just see Gene a lot in the mainstream.
Yeah.
Pat brought up a good point. If you put all the four faces together, what are people going to say? Gene Simmons? No, they're going to say Kiss.
Kiss.
If they see any individual members, are they going to say Ace? No, they're going to say Kiss.
That's right.
Now, don't you think if they see just a picture of Gene, they're going to say that's Kiss, not Gene Simmons. Yeah, that's Kiss. And the only reason he's the face is because he puts himself out there more than any other member. I think
Yeah.
that's the only reason.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, the face for me, as a diehard, is Paul.
There you go. Okay, good one. And yeah, it's you know, with all intent and purpose, I think I'm gonna agree with Curt and Pat. To me, the face of Kiss has always been Gene. You know, so powerful. Not only because of his gimmicks, you know, on stage and you know, blood spitting and fire breathing and all this stuff, but as you said, you know, he's a big marketing machine, and even you know, sometimes you even so you don't even have to see his face; you see his makeup drawing there, and you already say it's Kiss. Okay, so you don't think of anything else than that band. So if you see a star only, I doubt it that you're gonna say you're gonna relate, you know, the makeup to Kiss. But in the case of Gene, you know, he did a great job actually, saying that he kind of transported, you know, Kiss to another dimension. Yeah.
But even to take that question to another level, if you see Gene walking out of the streets without makeup, he's going to get mobbed.
Yeah.
Paul, for example, not so much.
Yeah.
A lot of casual fans don't recognize Paul without the makeup. They know Paul through the makeup only. So that just goes to show, no, Gene isn't necessarily the face because of the makeup. He's the face because he's Gene Simmons.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And he gets himself out there all the time, all the time.
Yeah. As Pat said, you know, the persona, even without a makeup. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I don't know if this is a tough one, Curt. I'm not sure it's a tough one. But musically speaking, though, is the Kiss sound more reflective of Paul or Gene? Okay, Curt, what do you think?
All right, so that's a tough one. But Paul, his heart has always been Kiss. So regardless of what the style of album or albums, the particular album in front of him, he's always been kind of the glue that held that album together, right? In the sense of his songs are genuine. I say generally, not genuinely, but generally the best on there. He puts his best foot forward. Sometimes Gene will have a great song or two, and the rest of them are his words, throwaway songs that made it on the album. Paul never seems to have a throwaway song. No matter what it is, you might like it, you might not like it, but it never appears to be a throwaway song. It's always the best song for that album at that time. So I would have to say, for me personally, Paul. Now I love Gene's heaviness and I love all that, but then if you look at it, for instance, Paul Stanley wrote God of Thunder, right, with Bryan Adams, and then they changed it maybe under Gene's, you know, hey, give the song to me and let me be the God of Thunder and whatnot. But they worked together and they made that song the epic song that it was. But then again, the initial creation was Paul Stanley and Bryan Adams. So he has a big, you know, he has a lot of different ways to pull in his ideas and still be Paul Stanley and still contribute to the band. So I don't know if that helps, but for me, it's Paul Stanley.
Okay. Pat, what do you think?
I tend to agree with Curt for other reasons, though. You know, the example that comes to mind is Dynasty. On that album, Gene is strangely absent.
Yeah.
He only has 2 songs. There was never a Kiss album, unless I'm totally mistaken, that has so little input from Paul. So in a sense, I think Paul always put Kiss first, whereas Gene always had, like, you know, multiple projects at the same time. So Kiss not being his priority somewhat showed, you know, and strangely enough, after that, on the Unmasked album, he's more present. So I think probably because the input from Gene doesn't put as much as Paul does. I believe if he had been a little more especially as Kiss became big, if he would have stayed focused on Kiss, could have been like Lennon McCartney, because when you Beatles, you say, well, which one is more the Beatles, Paul or John? Hard to say, because both stayed focused. So the competition is a lot tighter. Whereas with Kiss, unfortunately, Gene being distracted by other things, you got to give it to Paul. I was going to say, unfortunately, no, not unfortunately, but that's just the way it is.
He earned it. I will say this, if I may, to go along with what you're saying. So if you look at Unmasked, for instance, right, and you look at Dynasty, you look at Unmasked. So in Dynasty, Gene was carrying on with Cher, and he was getting into the Hollywood scene, right? So then if you look at Unmasked, right, it's the pop, it's all the things. They wanted to continue that I Was Made for Loving You, hitting, because they were doing great. And then all of a sudden the brakes are coming on. But then he's still very much Hollywood, very much Hollywood. So then he's really into Hollywood by the Elder, convinces Paul, this is what we need to do. Ace says, man, you're out of your mind. All the drama that came with that, but it's very much Hollywood. Hollywood. That's, to me, that's Gene driving that whole direction. And then it and I love all those albums, but then it turned the course back to hard rock, what Kiss was known for in Creatures, and they saved it. So I agree with you.
Sure. Yeah.
Curt, I checked out in the 80s. So in the 80s, I became that casual fan. I became the mainstream. And, living through the 80s, hearing anything about Kiss, it had to do with Gene. I hate Gene's songs in the 80s. To me, it's Paul. But everybody talked about Gene songs in the 80s. I remember that at that time. Do you guys have that same experience?
Yeah, of course.
So how's that possible? Paul has the better songs, but everybody thinks of Gene when it comes to the 80s stuff.
Of the band. Yeah.
So again, is he the face not only because of the makeup, but because of the music as well?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Powerful,
Yeah.
I would have to say, though, a lot of time in the 80s, Gene was the butt of the joke with those songs. I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but Burn, Bitch, Burn.
Oh, God.
All right. It's not a lady's favorite. All right. So, when you get into songs like that, and it's always the same thing, it's always the same topic, it's always, and you have Tears Are Falling, right? There's a big difference between Bitch Burn and Tears Are Falling. Two different, but total difference, complete difference. So a lot of times when my friends and I would talk about Kiss, because I stayed right on through, right? And it was a Gene topic. It was more of a laughable topic. And, poor misguided Gene. Yeah. But Paul Stanley's the ringleader, and he's holding it all together for us. He's going to keep this thing going. So, sorry, Gene.
Claudio, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's that's a really interesting question, I have to say. And with 50 years in history, I think it is fair to say that at the very beginning, I have to say in the 70s, I fully agree with Pat. So they were, a strong couple there, Paul and Gene writing, great songs. And the sound was basically defined by those two guys. Of course, Ace is a very significant portion of the Kiss sound. Actually, the two guitars, I think, Ace and Paul, no matter who the lead player was after, in the other lineups, Kiss will never sound the same if it's not because of Ace and Paul. So a strong portion of the Kiss sound is defined, I think, in my opinion, by Paul Stanley. But then if we go into the 80s, as you guys were saying, we don't have to forget that there's 13 years of Kiss without the makeup. There's no doubt that there was Paul Stanley there. And not only because of his look, but also his voice. So I'm just going to say this: by sound, we mean, music and we mean, lyrics and the voice. When you put a song on the radio, it's easily recognizable that, you know, Paul's voice versus Gene's voice. I don't think that anybody will recognize a Kiss song. Well, maybe, I don't know, I Love It Loud on those, but if you put a song from the 80s from Gene, nobody will say it's Kiss. So the same thing that we were talking about, who's the face, now that we're talking about the sound and the music, is definitely Paul Stanley to me. And if we go a little bit farther, to me, the 78 album, Paul, if you compare to Gene, and here I'm gonna concur, you know, with what Curt was saying. You know, 78 album, the Asshole album, it's all Hollywood. It's all trying to get into the mainstream, while Paul, it's always, you know, stick to the roots. You know, the 78 album, to me, that's pure Paul Stanley. And I'm gonna say this, and then I'm gonna pass the ball to you, Pas. But I don't think there's even a Gene Simmons sound, because he can write stuff as, you know, kind of a Beatles song or anything, and then he can write Unholy, and then he can write some heavy stuff. But I don't think that the heavy stuff is really his style. On the other side of the street, so you have Paul Stanley, who has really a really well-defined sound. So yeah, again, a long story short, to me, that's definitely Paul Stanley.
I don't know. I want to make the argument that Gene's makeup in the 70s was so powerful that when we were young and getting into Kiss, it made an impression on us. And then growing up in the 80s, that impression was still there. And when we listen to the Kiss music, I found that Gene always stood out to the fans from the 70s, and also to the casual fans. His makeup is that powerful. Even if he wasn't in it 100%, he was doing his movies in Hollywood. Again, I remember people talking about Gene's music in the 80s, less so Paul, you know? And explain to me then why in the 90s, when Revenge was released, I believe it was Bob Ezrin that wanted Gene to have the opening song, because people, and I remember the quote, because people remember Gene, people know Gene, and they wanted a kick-ass album, and Gene was a person to get it started, you know? And I don't know, as a producer, hearing all of Gene's garbage in the 80s, for him to open up that record in the 90s, we want to come back and Gene's going to open with what, Bitch Burn 2? No, you know, I wouldn't do it, but they did. And the question is why? Only because his music was still powerful even in the 80s, you know? Now, I'm trying to be objective here because my favorite member is Paul. So to me, clearly, the music of Kiss is defined by Paul, like you were saying, Claudio, because he's been so consistent.
Yeah.
It's the roots of what Kiss is all about, and he never deviated from that. Gene was throwing everything, whatever sticks, that's what he plays. And Curt was saying a lot of throwaway songs, of course, you know? So am I being objective? I don't know. But if I want people to be introduced to Kiss, I'm gonna put Paul songs. His voice, the music, it's definitely Paul. But something like, you know, God of Thunder, Christine 16, those are songs that defined Kiss in the 70s, defined Gene in the 70s, you know, and couple that with the stage antics, it's hard to get that out of your head. And Kiss fans love the band because they're so visual, and we are visual people, and that visual is always in our head when we listen to the music.
It is true. It is.
And what
so
do we
true.
think about? We think of Gene.
It is so true.
It's a really complex question. Questions, the first and the second.
Because
musically and all that, yes, it's Paul. The face, yes, it's Paul. Is it really? Is it really? You know?
It is. It's true. Well, that's why, you know, Kiss is so interesting, and we find so many different angles on to each one of the questions. And you know, just to complement what you were saying, Pas, you know. I think that the Gene was kind of lost, you know, during the Dynasty, you know, and Unmasked, and even, you know, The Elder. But what a comeback with Creatures of the Night. So then that that combo there, you know, of a strong voice and the imagery and the sound on Creatures of the Night. Yeah, that makes me think more of Gene than Paul in that case. You know, that's yeah. So now let's go to the next one. Who do you think was the driving force for putting Kiss into the mainstream? This is a really good one. You know, being Kiss such a high hype, you know, a band. Who was responsible for that, Pask? Was it Paul or Gene?
It was definitely Gene, 100%. Now the reason being, because Gene was less of a musician than Paul, less about the creativity, more about the marketing. Paul, like we said, stuck to his roots. It was always about the band. It was always about the music. And that's what he focused on. He didn't have time to focus on everything else. It's, you know, let me create the best sound that I can, the best songs that I can, and hopefully fans will like it. But Gene is like, no. Forget the music. Let's go for the show, for the spectacle, for the merchandise and all of that. And I think what really put Kiss in the mainstream and really put Gene in the forefront of the band, I gotta say, was Family Jewels. I mean, Family Jewels was a huge hit. Everybody was talking about that show, fans, non-fans, and they saw Gene in a different light. Because even though they weren't diehard Kiss fans, they saw this mean demon as a regular dad, a regular person, a quirky, weird person. You know, the show was genius for that. Yes, it was scripted, it was obvious, but even if it was scripted, you get the sense of who this man really is, and it really sets something to the mainstream audience. And then my favorite episodes were the episodes with Kiss in it. And as a diehard, yeah, that's what we want to see. But as a casual fan, oh, look at this, Kiss. And that's how I think mainstream fans start to get into the band more and more. And that's because of Gene. Couple that with the stage antics, couple that with the merchandising. You know, to me, absolutely Gene.
There you go. Patrick?
Yeah, I would agree with Pask on that one, that Gene is probably the one who pushed the hardest. Now, I'm sure the other guys were like they wanted to make it. Remember, Peter said willing to do anything to make it. But I think Gene had his, like you said, Pask, he had the marketing DNA in him. And I'm pretty sure he was the one who sent all the press kits to all the important people to get their attention. You know, like come and see. Like I think he was the one who said we had a lot of guts to say, "Hey, we're better than Led Zeppelin."
Yeah,
those other people. So I think Gene was like being I was gonna say the king of hype. I mean, they did have something to back it up, but it was not just hype. But he had the drive to say, "Let's take it to the next level." I'm not sure if he wouldn't have done that, we might have heard of Kiss a lot later on. I think Gene was the one who pushed it. Like Pask was saying, maybe Paul was busier with the more art approach of Kiss, whereas Gene was like, okay, let's take this to the next level. So yeah, no question about it. I think Gene was a driving force.
Okay. Curt?
Well, listening to you guys and kind of thinking about how this works. So if I remember correctly, I read somewhere that even in the Kiss action figures originally, Gene's outsold everybody by quite a lot, right? So if you looked at, Kiss Meets the Phantom, Gene was the one that was advocating to do a movie. He was like, let's do the movie. He wanted to do the movie. When it came to the comic books, Gene was very, very much heavily involved with comic books. So you get that back into there, right? So even all the way up to Family Jewels, it was always, keeping Kiss in the forefront of one way or another. Even, the beginning of MTV, they took off the makeup on MTV. They did Lick It Up, and they did All Hell's Breaking Loose. and they continued that. So I would have to say that Gene Simmons has been an integral part of that. I think he's been the driving force of that, and I think that I think when they found Bill Aucoin, he saw that from his television background and said, "This is something we could do. We could really make this happen." And I think he did a brilliant job of that. And still to this day, we get emails with, "Hey, we got this other crazy amount of money we're asking you to pay."
Yeah, sure.
And who's going to get it first?
That's right. That's right. Good take. I think I'm gonna agree with you guys. There's no doubt. As Pat said, from the very beginning, when even Gene was working in that, agency there, and he was printing stuff, and sending everywhere, trying to contact, different promoters and managers and all this stuff. And what's interesting in all the documentaries and books that we've read, they always say, people who were really close to the band, they were saying that, the vision came from both Paul and Gene. But I think that Gene who was responsible for putting that into motion. He was the one doing the real stuff to actually, let's say, make that vision happen. And I think he was even in all eras, maybe a little bit more absent on the 80s, but still, as you said, Pask. So he always had these bright ideas of being on screen, whether if it's a movie, if it's not Kiss related, he helped a lot to push Kiss where Kiss is today as a legendary band, and because of the imagery too. So it's we have to agree that he's a big part of what Kiss is all about. And during the reunion, if you watch the Second Coming, the guy, he's working everywhere, designing posters and merch and trying to set up new dates, everything. So definitely, Gene Simmons, hats off for our dear Demon. Yeah.
But just one final point, Claudia, you were saying that he's the one who was a driving force to push Kiss forward. Was he really trying to push Kiss forward, or was he trying to push himself forward? Because I think that's the major difference between Paul and Gene. Gene, yes, he got the band. Is it a coincidence that he got the band into the mainstream and people happen to remember him over Paul? That's because he's pushing himself. He's promoting himself. Paul wasn't promoting Paul. Paul was promoting Kiss.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I think that's the big difference between the both of them.
Good point. That's why it might sound a bit selfish, but we've heard Paul saying, "Well, Kiss is my band." Okay, so it's all about that, Yeah. And Gene Simmons is Gene Simmons brand.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. All right. Here's another tough one. Who has the bigger impact live? The front man, Paul Stanley, or Gene Simmons? This time we'll start with Claudio.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'm gonna fall on this trap again. With 50 years career, it's tough to give you one name. To me, when I see those early shows, to me it was all about Gene. And I don't know if it's because he's my favorite member, but to me, at the very beginning, I find that Paul was not, of course, the frontman that he developed later on. He was a little bit more, shy, I have to say, or not so outgoing. While Gene, he did everything. He captured the attention of everybody. By spitting blood or fire, and his moves, his attitude on stage. Now, we fast forward, and then the frontman starts to show up, you know, in the 70, let's say 76, 77, 78, and then there's no limit for Mr. Paul Stanley. In the 80s, there's no Gene Simmons, sorry, live. To me, there's no Gene Simmons live, except for a little bit of a comeback with Hot in the Shade. And then, of course, you know, with the club tour in Revenge, that was really interesting to see. But it was still Paul Stanley, you know, taking over. So, yeah, I know I'm surfing the wave here, but who has the bigger impact live? I have to say Paul Stanley. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Curt, your thoughts?
Wow. Okay. So if you look at the 70s, and Gene, you know, he is the one who totally embraced this character. He completely embraced this character. So whether it was coming down the stairs on the Love Gun tour and with the, you know, bats and the demons and the fire and the blood and the sticking the tongue out, wagging his finger and the whole 9 yards, right? Kicking his boots around like a big Godzilla, all that stuff. You know, look at me, look at me, look at me, right? You know, that was definitely, you know, how could you not watch the guy? Paul Stanley, like you said, Claudio, you know, he came into his own. The other guys couldn't really fully embrace their character quite as much as Gene, because Gene was into comic books and the horror films. He lived that character. So I think it was the hardest for him to give up in the 80s.
Yeah.
Now what do? I don't have boots. I don't have demon boots to jump around in. I stick my tongue out. You know, I breathe fire. I bounce around, and I got to quit doing that because people are looking at me like, you know, I'm, you know, a knucklehead, right? Paul commands the stage. He captivates you. So more so than Gene. So Gene will go, oh yeah, all right, right? Paul will get you into stories. He will get you into whatever. He will get the crowd back and forth. He'll have the crowd chanting. He'll have, whether it's Love Gun flying across it, whatever he's doing, he captivates you from the time he is in that center ring, right? So all eyes on Paul. When he was singing in the 70s and he was doing all that, you know, there was 4 really very strong personas up there, right? 4 big personalities. Gene definitely, you know, captured his own, but man, Paul Stanley has always been there. He's always been the ringleader. He's always been the one that the girls went crazy over. He was always that guy. And I got to tell you a quick little story. So I'm going to Nashville. This is, you know, quite some time back. I'm going to Nashville, and I'm going to the NAMM show, and I'm going to be there as an artist with SIT strings and all this other stuff. So I knew I was going to see Paul Stanley, right? So I told my mom, I said, hey, Paul Stanley's going to be there. There's a good chance that I'm going to get to see him and maybe talk with him for a little bit or whatever. And Mom was like, oh, that's great. She said, be sure and tell Paul that I always thought he was the cute one. And I was like, I always thought he was the cutest. So I said, okay, Mom, being the good Southerner that I am, yes, ma'am. Paul. And I tell him, I said, oh yeah, by the way, my mom said to tell you that she thought you were always the cutest. And Paul did this. Your mom?
That's a good story. I love
Honest to God, true story.
Oh
but yeah,
God.
Paul, you know, he is that guy. He's the ringleader. He's the guy that gets the circus going. He's that guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Patrick, your thoughts?
I've always believed, at least in the earliest years, that KISS was a collective effort of 4 guys. Now, of course, Gene has the most antics. He has the blood, he has the fire, and you have Paul who breaks the guitar. And I think he became the ringleader, ringmaster, whatever you want to call it. I think he has that very kind of Mick Jagger approach. He can, when you go to the Kiss show, although Gene has all his tricks and everything, Paul, he commands the stage.
Yeah.
The one who talks to the crowd, he makes them sing, he makes them do whatever. So I think that there is a good balance there between the two of them. Of course, Gene gets all the attention, like I said earlier, but I think uh, I cannot picture Gene being a ringleader.
Mm-hmm.
He has his character, and that works. And yeah, hey, I agree that he's the one who gets the most into his character when he walks on stage and everything. But I cannot imagine him between the songs going, yeah, by the way, the next song is Paul is more suited for that. Then sometimes you had Ace and Peter talking very little to the crowd as well, like very little. So no, Paul really, I think you can tell he's in charge of the stage. So I think there's a balance there. I think.
Interesting to use the word balance. Being a 10-year-old kid, they went to see Kiss in 1979, the Dynasty show. Listen, Gene made the biggest impression on me. Come on, seeing that guy larger than life on stage, for sure, Gene was the guy back in the 70s. And then, like Claudio said, Paul was more the guy during the 80s. Mm-hmm. But something happened to Gene when the makeup came back on. I think after 2004, maybe he didn't become the demon. He became Uncle Gene.
Yeah.
He became Uncle Gene. Doing the texting thing, the wedding ring thing. He was being silly on stage.
Yeah.
You don't get that growling. That you rarely get that. And I love in the later shows when he's spitting blood and you have the green light on him and the bells go on. That is the demon. That is really cool. But the rest of the time, he doesn't have an impact today.
Yeah, he's fooling around. Yeah,
he's fooling around. He's being silly.
Absolutely.
He's being Uncle Gene. He's not Uncle Gene. He's the demon.
Yeah.
So yes, you guys are completely right. Paul commands the stage, and I think that really started in the 80s when the four characters, like you said, Patrick, there were four distinct characters on stage. And they were competing for attention. And at the time, Gene got most of the attention. But then when it became just about the music and who drives that music forward, it was Paul. It was Paul in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And then again, he becomes Uncle Gene, and Paul still commanded that stage because he was the driving force. And I'm sorry, I love Tommy and Eric, but when you see them on stage, you're there really for Paul and Gene.
Yeah.
And those two are in competition. It's the rock star versus the uncle.
Yeah.
Who are we gonna pick? We're gonna pick the rock star.
I know that. I was when you started talking, I was thinking of that. How kind of strange Gene became. But I think the right definition is Uncle Gene. Sometimes with his moves and stuff, his gestures, it's kind of.
Oh my God.
It's oh my goodness, it's very strange. You know what I mean? He's not the demon anymore.
No,
not at all.
Well, he's the uncle that your parents worry about. I'm going Uncle Gene's for the night.
Yeah.
Oh, we're not. He's going to be a troublemaker, that guy.
Yeah. So, guys, again, with the long, history of the band, so there were many mistakes made on both sides. But who do you believe hurt the band more? And this is a touchy one. So, Paul or Gene? Patrick, what do you think?
It hurts to say, but I would say Gene, because although I gotta say in the 80s, I could understand why people were telling me that Kiss were passe, because they were so huge in the 70s. Now in the 80s, they're trying to be their wannabes. They're trying to be the current trend, which obviously didn't work. But Gene was not focusing on Kiss. He was doing tons of other things. So it was just Paul carrying Kiss. And I remember reading in History, and I thought, Paul sometimes really hits the nail on the head where he says, I think what Gene was doing was as damaging as what Ace and Peter were doing, but on a different level.
Mm.
Meaning that not being focused on Kiss and doing all these other projects and bring throwaways to put on the albums, not even sitting down and say, okay, I'm gonna focus on that. It hurt the band because like the albums were, most people agree that, oh, okay, the Paul songs are good, but the Gene songs are
Yeah.
hit and miss, and mostly miss, however. So I think it did damage to Kiss. I have a tendency to believe that if Gene had stayed focused on Kiss in the 80s, we might have had something different.
Okay. Okay. Pask?
I give the responsibility solely to Gene on this one. You know, you send the question, mistakes are made on both sides. Mistakes are mostly made on Gene's side. And if Gene is going to be the face of Kiss for whatever reason, then he takes on the responsibility for what happens in the band later on. Because like I said earlier, Paul was the driving force for the band Kiss. Gene was a driving force for his ego, which was fine because his ego, his persona, was still indirectly driving the band forward. But then his ego took over even more, and it was about his ego outside of the band now. It was movies and rock star, you know, celebrity girlfriends and stuff. It wasn't about Kiss anymore, and definitely hurt the band for sure. And then in the 80s with his throwaway songs, if it wasn't for Paul, they'd never get through the 80s.
Oh no.
There's absolutely no way. He really hurt the band in the 80s. And that they survived the 80s is a downright miracle.
Yeah.
Thanks to Paul. No thanks to Gene on that one. You know? And then the reunion, yeah, you got the demon back, you got the 4 characters back. You know, it was less about his ego at that time and more about the mystique of the band. It brings back memories of our childhood in the 70s and stuff. And like I said earlier, then he became Uncle Gene. And it took away from the later shows because he was no longer the demon. I understand age, yes, they weren't moving around as much. I get that. But Paul wasn't moving around as much as well. And you still felt he had the energy of a 20-year-old up there on stage. Yeah. You could tell Gene didn't.
Yeah.
You know, so you know what? If we're going to argue that Gene was a face, okay, fine. Gene was a face, musically, visually, whatever. But Buddy, take responsibility because now the responsibility of the band is on his shoulders. And so many times during the 50-year history of the band, whatever went wrong, Gene was right there in the middle of it. Gene was oftentimes the reason behind it. Yes, now I'm generalizing, but generally speaking, I got to say absolutely Gene. Sorry, dude.
Okay. Curt?
Well, thinking about this as this conversation unfolds, I would say definitely Gene, right? But thinking about what we've talked about with marketing and his drive for marketing and his drive for the imagery and everything else, we know that Paul was pushing to take the makeup off. And it needed to happen for them to survive. And we know that, right? But I think Gene really lost his way because creatively, Paul is definitely the driving force creatively. Gene was picking up the creative force visually. So now what does he have to do? What product does he have to sell other than Gene Simmons? I mean, if you think about it, you know, you can't put out a Kiss comic book necessarily to the masses without makeup. You can't, you know, put out lunchboxes without makeup. You can't put out, you know, action figures without the makeup. You can't do all these things. So he's probably thinking in a creative sense where to focus his creativity, which is clearly more so in marketing and promotions than it is in the actual music, which is what Paul's strong suit is. The encompassment of Kiss, right? That overall Kiss. And now they don't have that marketing Kiss. They just have the music Kiss, right? So when they come back with the makeup, then Uncle Gene is able to, you know, put that nostalgia feeling back into it. The marketing machine is revving back up and Gene's all in. Now Gene's all in again because his creative juices are flowing. Now Paul's not having to take all the weight himself to keep this entity going, creatively, musically speaking, right? Who definitely saved the day, who was at every, every track, he was at everything, he was there all the time on every album. And I know how that is firsthand. Be there every minute, wherever your other person's recording, being there the entire time. That takes a lot of determination and drive and creativity, and you want to see this through. So he wasn't absent, is what I'm trying to say. But now Gene has a way to come back creatively to complement Paul's creativity, and they bring that force back together again. And that's what I think was what was so amazing about it.
Great take. I loved it.
Yeah.
Super. Yeah, that's a really, really good way to put it. I fully agree with you guys. I think, no doubt, Gene, but you basically said it all. But at the same time, I would like to mention something that over the last few years, and this is more for diehard, because for the mainstream, they don't care if whether Paul or Gene, they take it on Ace and Peter, bashing them and, talking things and give strong opinions on their past and abuse and stuff. But I think out of the two, Paul, he seems to be the bitter one, okay? He was the one starting all this. I know that sometimes it's for publicity, but I see more Gene doing that because, whether if it's for good news or bad news, he always wants to have the band, and people talking about the band. But Paul, I think, and why I'm saying that this is for diehard, because we take the original lineup with some fantasy, with love, and we don't want those guys to be fighting when they are, 70 years old. We were all wishing, sometimes, people were dreaming of, the last two shows and maybe not Ace and Peter showing up, but, give thanks to them and all this stuff. And just to wrap it up, that's one of the things that I didn't like about Paul. He seemed to have some kind of grudges there that he wanted to kind of put out with no need. So why talking about Ace and Peter and their problems with addictions and stuff at this point in time? So it might not have hurt the band, financially, because I don't think that they're not selling stuff because of their opinions. But to me, there's no need, and to me that's a way of hurting the band. Talking about past members, it doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah.
Good point. Good point. Okay, one final question before we close the curtain on this episode, and this is sort of like a bookend question to put everything together. So do you believe that KISS could have moved forward without Paul or Gene? Claudia, what do you think?
No way. No, there's no way that KISS could have become what it became without one of those two guys. I'll come back to something that Curt and Pat were saying. I think you mentioned that too, Pask. I think the key word here is balance. And what Curt mentioned in the previous question, that's exactly the point. Those two guys, they seem to have found the recipe to be together for 50 years, being so different, but at the same time having the same vision and trying to make KISS what it is today. So no, I cannot imagine, KISS without Paul or Gene. And when there were talks about KISS 2.0, replacing those guys, come on, sorry, but of course, for fans of Ace and Peter, it could be the same. But even to me, it's not the same. Without Ace and Peter, it's not the same band. but without Paul and Gene, or Gene, sorry, there's no Kiss there, not at all.
Okay, good. Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Claudio. I mean, I know that most bands go through personnel changes. It's just part of, bands, being alive. Not a lot of bands have stayed intact. That being said, I think that there's a limit to how much you can still call the band, like for instance, Kiss. Now, let's say Paul decides to leave the boat, and Gene says, "Okay, it's still going to be called Kiss." At this point in time, I think it gets to a point where it's like, no, this is too diluted. I'll give you an example. A band that I really like, Leonard Skinner. Okay, I know two guys died in the plane crash, and okay, they were able to revive the band 10 years later, but most of the original guys were still there. Now they dropped one by one. Now it's to a point where the sole original member passed away last year. And they're still continuing as Leonard Skinner. And I'm like, no. I mean, I don't care if the lead singer is the brother of Ronnie Van Zant. He's a good guy and everything, but he's not an original. Yeah. So it's like, you're going to call this band Leonard Skinner where there's zero original member?
Yeah.
I think at some point it gets to, no, call it something else. Like you mentioned Kiss 2.0. Well, at least they're not trying to sell me the idea that this is still Kiss. It's 2.0 means something. So I'd be sort of okay with that, but don't try to pass it off as Kiss without Gene or Paul or both of them. I mean, I remember them saying, "Oh, we can't be replaced. Kiss will continue." No. That doesn't make any sense. Not to me, anyways.
Right.
Okay. Curt, what do you think?
Well, that's a tough one to follow because, as far as Gene and Paul are concerned, you have Paul Stanley that sings the epic Paul Stanley songs, and you have Gene Simmons that sings the epic Gene Simmons songs. I mean, you can't end the show without Rock and Roll All Night, which is Gene. And when they started the show on Crazy Nights tour with I Stole Your Love and it wasn't Detroit Rock City, I was losing my mind. What are you doing? What are you doing? Ask my buddy Tom about that. So anyway, so I can't see Kiss without Gene or Paul. It doesn't feel right. Now, as far as like with Leonard Skinner, they're friends of mine. I grew up with them. Well, they're older than me, but I grew up under them. And so I knew everybody. I remember meeting Ronnie, but I knew everybody, and whatnot. So it was really an evolution of who was coming in, right? So, Ricky Medlock was originally their drummer, who's now with their guitar, their guitarist. But I know that, like I told Peter Keys, I said, Billy was a dear friend of mine. I said, I know that Billy would want nobody other than Peter Keys because he lives that music. He really lives that music, and he pays such respect and honor. And again, now I've had the privilege of being on tour with him many times, and I've had the privilege of just hanging out on the bus for a few days, and seeing how this works. And it really is a family. It very much is a family. So I understand, I have this discussion with friends of mine, Molly Hatchet, different bands, and it just continues, but it's an evolution of, of work. And I would say, with Leonard Skinner, they continue to put out great music. Mm-hmm. So I love the music. I'm a fan of the band, but I love the people in the band. They're my personal friends and their family, and I love them dearly. But I also, from a different standpoint, love the music. So I could see what people say with that. And I know that Gary, I know firsthand, Gary pushed them to continue. He I can tell you stories, but he honestly, I was there many times and he kept saying, please keep the music going. So I think I can sum it up like this with that. And then I'll move on to the Kiss thing. So I was in the park one time in Green Cove Springs, and Mom and this little girl go walking by. There's no music playing. And I just happened to be on the phone with Johnny, and we're talking about whatever silly stuff we were talking about. And this little girl starts singing Sweet Home Alabama. And I said, hush, be quiet, listen. I'm trying to be all cool, He's like, what? I said, just be quiet, listen. So this little girl singing Sweet Home Alabama, and she was 6 or 7 years old. Out of nowhere, no music playing anywhere in the park. And it touched my heart so much because I see how people, I go to these shows as a fan. I go as a a participating member of an opening act as part of the family. And I see how much it means to people in the audience and how they come up to them and say, please don't stop.
Yeah.
So I can say that for Leonard Skinner firsthand, personally, 100%. 100%. They do it with honor and dignity. With Gene and Paul, look, Eric Singer's phenomenal. Phenomenal. I was upset that he was the first blonde in the Kiss and not me. So, Bruce Kulick was amazing. Vinny was great for what he did. Mark St. John was great for what he did. Tommy Thayer is great for what he does. I respect all of them. Of course, Ace and Peter are, the original Fab Four, in my opinion. But when it comes down to the sustainability of Kiss, right? They could put out the greatest show on earth and have guys in makeup that looked like them and sang like them, and people would still, go,
yeah.
right? But if Gene and Paul aren't there together, it's not going to work. But if they did a 2.0, if they did the Stanley and Simmons kids, who knows? Who knows what they could do? And I mean, anything is possible. Kiss fans want to enjoy the moment. And that's the beautiful thing about music. You can go to a show, whether it's Alice Cooper or Kiss or Skinner or whomever, you can go to the show, and for that amount of time, the only thing you need to be concerned with is being entertained and being in the moment and enjoying it and enjoying your friends being there with you or making new friends. And nothing does that like Kiss. Kiss is the greatest at that, in my opinion. So you go there and you don't meet strangers, you meet new friends at a Kiss concert. Yeah. So my answer is either Gene and Paul together in the same Kiss band, or not on the stage at all, and possibly, but I can't see one or the other surviving without the other one as Kiss.
I know this sounds cliche, but Paul said, and I think it's true. Kiss is a philosophy. It's a lifestyle. It's much bigger than the band. So, when we listen to the music, we're transported to another time. It gives us opportunities to be with fans from around the world, to have once in a lifetime experiences. How many times have I said that? And that's what makes the Kiss experience so incredible, so amazing. But that is bigger than Kiss. It's bigger than the 4 original members, bigger than any of the members in the band, bigger than Paul and Gene. So there's 2 aspects here. There's the band, and then there's the experience. We could experience Kiss in many different ways. Expos, Kiss cruises, heaven forbid, the freaking avatars, whatever, whatever. But if you want to experience Kiss, that's with Paul and Gene. Without Paul and Gene, it's no longer, in my opinion, it's no longer Kiss. It's the Kiss experience, which we can have through cover bands too, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
But don't call it a Kiss show.
That's right.
Without Paul and Gene, call it a Kiss experience, but not a Kiss show. It's not a Kiss show. It's not Kiss. It's an experience. Totally different. Totally different.
Do you believe that it's because we grew up with those guys? There's an emotional attachment to them, to Paul and Gene, because for, let's say, for occasion, for casual fans, okay, that they like the music, they might go to a show. They don't even know if it's the real Paul or Gene, and they're gonna have a blast. They're gonna live the full Kiss experience. But for us, for diehards, do you believe that it's because emotional attachment to them?
No, because Kiss fans even say now that Kiss is a tribute band without Ace and Peter.
Okay,
right. So for them, it's basically what you're saying.
Okay.
But is it an emotional attachment to them? Again, no, because they were, Paul and Gene were the founding members of the band. They are the philosophers, in a sense, of the band. They created the lifestyle. They created the philosophy that we live by because we relate to it, because Kiss fans have so much in common. And again, it's something that is bigger than Paul and Gene. It's about the experience, you know? But where does that experience come from? It has to start somewhere. There's going to be a foundation somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
And that foundation is Paul and Gene.
It's them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it always gave us a common denominator, right?
Exactly.
It didn't matter, you know, what your background was. It didn't matter, you know, what you looked like. It didn't matter short or tall, or, you know, whatever the case was. It didn't matter. None of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was that Kiss was telling you that we did it and you can do it too. And they were always the ones that were giving you the speech of, it doesn't matter what your parents say or what the philosophy of this guy or that guy, you can do it. You can do it. You can achieve what you want to achieve. And I always loved that. And it always, you know, still to this day, you know, I listen to God Gave Rock and Roll to You. And I know they didn't write the song, but I listen to that, you know, and I'm like, yeah, you know, they give you, you know, like right? You know, right? So they give you that sense of, you know, we can do it. We can do this. And as a Kiss fan, you know, going through whatever the situations might be, it could be great, it could be whatever. You had that, yeah, we can do this. You know, the Kiss Army. I love it. I'm a proud card-carrying member of the Kiss Army.
I love it. But would you have any final comments on that?
Yeah, I think the Kiss I don't know about that. I think again, do we have an emotional attachment? I've always said something for myself. I am a fan of the four guys.
Yeah.
I believe because even like Without Makeup and like when Ace released his album in the 80s and even Peter, they still have that stigma. So emotion, I'm not sure about the word emotional, but I would say there is definitely like being a fanatic of what they brought. The chemistry of the four of them together. I think that's more that to me that reflects more how I feel. Emotional, I'm not so sure. I mean, we love the band and everything, but no, I think more it's being a fan of. So that's why again, right now, like Kiss without Ace, Gene and Paul.
Yeah.
No.
No way.
No.
Okay. Good. It's well, once again, you know, this we could keep going forever on this one, and it's been truly an awesome time that we had together once again. Pat, thank you so much, and Curt, it's always a pleasure, man, to have you on. Congratulations, you know, congratulations to everything that is happening, you know, with your band, with your music, and you know, well deserved, as we said before. And if there's someone who can actually speak on behalf of musicians and how it is to be in a band, that's you. So that's why it's so important to have you on the show, man, all the time. Thank you so much.
I love it. I'm a big fan of the show, and I love it. I listen to every episode if I can't watch it, and I really thoroughly enjoy it. I look forward to it. I have been looking forward to this. So thank you so much for having me back.
Thank you, guys.
No, thank you so much. And Claudio hit the nail on the head. I mean, you know, it's interesting that, you know, we have a rotation of people coming on the show for the discussion panels, and everybody brings something special to the show. And in this case, Curt, you know, you bring in the experience, you know, you work in the business. So it's a whole different perspective that we don't have. And you add so much to the show and to our discussion panels.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. And Patrick, as usual, man, you are that 70s fan, and I you know, fantastic perspective. And
always.
Oftentimes with you, Pat, you know, you come up with points that it's like, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So
appreciate it. It's always fun.
Can't wait to do this again, guys.
Oh, for sure.
To the KISS Army, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, please send them to talktome@kissarmynationpodcast.com. Until the next time, remember, never stop rocking. Take care, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and X. You can watch us on YouTube or listen to us on Podomatic, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. This is about you, so please like and subscribe to support the amazing guests we have on the show. See you soon, KISS Army.